From the NewsChannel 5 network, this is MorningLine.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Beres here on a Wednesday. A very interesting show on tap, and I invite you to join in the conversation because I really want to hear your opinion on what you think of this whole situation involving the Tony Stewart controversy. By now, unless you live under a rock or just choose to ignore these types of things, you're aware of the fact that this past weekend, Tony Stewart at a dirt oval was involved in a fatal accident involving another driver who I think was upset that he went off the track, felt Tony Stewart maybe forced him off the track a bit, but then that driver jumps out of the vehicle, walks onto the track to confront Stewart. He is then hit by Stewart's car and killed. All right, just an awful, awful accident, wreck, crash, whatever you want to call it. I say accident now, collision anyway, we know that. No criminal charges at this point, but they continue to look into it. And we are going to show you video. It was caught on video. I want to warn everyone again, you may have seen clips on the news where it goes up to the point of impact, but on this morning show, we're going to show the entire video, including the impact. It's difficult to watch. It's a little bit graphic, but we'll show that to you. But then also, why we're doing the show today, a couple days later, is that another second video has surfaced, one that none of us have seen yet, but is now in the hands of investigators. This case is still open. They've said there's no indication there's going to be any criminal charges yet. Could there be? What really happened? What do you think happened? We're going to talk about that this morning with NewsChannel 5 legal analyst Nick Leonardo, who has looked very closely at this. Good to have you on, Nick.
Hey, good morning.
A lot of strong opinions on this, and I know you have some very interesting thoughts as well. We'll talk to Nick. We also have NewsChannel 5 Sports Steve Lehman joining us. I thought, Steve, since we got you out of bed early this morning, we'll hit you real quick on what you can share with us. It sounds like right now, at least as far as Tony Stewart's concerned, he hasn't decided if he's going to be in the NASCAR race this weekend, has he?
Yeah, that's exactly right. He's still kind of weighing all his options at this point. The one thing he has said is he will not race a dirt track race this weekend in Indiana, which was what he was scheduled to do, and frankly what he likes to do in his free time. That's why he was in New York last week racing at Canandaigua Speedway, which is just about an hour north of Watkins Glen, which is where the Sprint Cup cars were racing last weekend. He still has a decision to make. I mean, obviously this is one of the biggest drivers in the sport, one of the biggest names in the sport. He's a three-time Sprint Cup champion. You're getting close to the time of the year where you get into the chase. So this is the stretch run, kind of like baseball's in a stretch run. This is the stretch run for NASCAR right now. It's clearly races he doesn't want to miss in his season. But as we saw last weekend, when people started talking about this, because remember, Nick, he was originally planning on still running Watkins Glen on Sunday at noon, just about 14 hours after this incident happened, and then he slept on it overnight. I think they heard the public outcry that said that is inappropriate for him to get back in a car this quickly and totally disrespectful to what happened last night. And ultimately, I think he made the right decision that day to sit it out and just let things simmer down for a second. But it will be very interesting to see how long he lets things simmer before he hops back into a car.
I'll say this, Steve. I bet he races this weekend, and I understand the sensitivity issue, and I agree with you. Last weekend, probably the right call. But you know, he's got a bunch of sponsors that help pay his $20 million racing fee, you know, and they want him out there, and their sponsorships out there. Don't tell me he's not feeling pressure from his sponsors.
Oh, I'm sure he is, and I think you're probably right that I imagine he will be in the car this weekend, and that's sort of the other dynamic here that people have talked about a little bit within the industry is people have long asked questions of why a guy like Tony Stewart or some of these, big-name drivers are driving in these races on these small dirt tracks. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I have been told by people who know racing that the total purse of the race that he was in on Saturday night was probably less than $5,000.
But here's my point. I mean, and really quickly on this, Steve, because we're going to get to the video here and take some calls. But let me ask you this. Why is that even a big deal? As I sit here following it, I do think about, like, Michael Jordan, who had a love of a game clause. He could play a pickup game. You hear about Kevin Durant doing that with the NBA. Why do we care? If I'm a kid like this Kevin Ward Jr. fella, I love the fact that here's a NASCAR star that's participating in the race. I figure he's more skilled than most of those other drivers anyway. You could argue maybe, well, gosh, he's a big fish in a small pond, but still, why is that even an issue? If Tony Stewart wants to race in these dirt track ovals, I think that's fine. And I don't think it makes him any more likely to cause a wreck. In fact, probably less likely, since he's likely more skilled than the rest of those drivers.
Well, I think
why is that an issue?
I think the real reason, Nick, is sort of the other side of it. Is here you have one of the most skilled drivers in the world who's driving a machine with millions and millions of dollars backing on the biggest circuit in the world on Sundays.
Yeah.
On Saturday night, he's going off to some small dirt track in for town nearby with less skilled drivers. And remember, a year ago, he was in a major accident on a dirt track where he broke his leg and he missed the entire second half of the season. This is a three-time Sprint Cup champion that knocked himself out of the Sprint Cup race last year because he got in an accident, no fault of his own, on a dirt track.
No, you're right. So, but that's kind of a separate issue. It doesn't have as much to do then with the death of Kevin Ward, but it's more if I'm one of the sponsors, I'm telling Tony, just like if I were the Chicago Bulls, telling Michael Jordan, please don't do this. We don't want to risk you getting hurt. Real quick, before we let you go, Steve, you've seen the video, okay? And Nick Leonardo is going to join us, and we're going to get his take here in a moment, legally speaking. You know more about dirt track racing than either of us and how it is going around there. But as you've seen this, and I think at first blush, most of us say, what on earth was Ward thinking? Has to be an accident. Are you surprised that there's still the possibility and some talking and investigators still looking at maybe criminal charges? I mean, as you see this, is there anything to make you think maybe Tony Stewart thought, you know what, maybe I'm going to put a scare into this kid, and it went too far?
I can see that, Nick.
Okay.
I mean, everybody knows that Tony Stewart is a bit of a hothead. We've seen the video of him taking off his helmet and firing it, and I believe it was Kevin Harvick's car a couple of years ago during a Sprint Cup race after a similar crash where he was out on foot on the track. This is a terrible, terrible accident anytime someone loses life in a sporting arena like this, but it is part of the occupation to a degree. When you're talking about race car drivers, you accept some of that. Here's the bottom line, though, is I think the only person who knows what happened Saturday night, who's still left with us, unfortunately, is Tony Stewart. And whether he thought maybe I'm going to goose him a little bit or give him a little bit of a scare, he's the only one that's going to be able to really answer that question. But I can tell you this. If Kevin Ward Jr. does not get out of his car and does not start walking down a dimly lit track in a black fire suit while cars are still going around at 30-some miles an hour under a caution, this doesn't happen.
Right.
So I think the one thing people really need to be talking about is starting at NASCAR at the top level. They need to make rules that if you're a driver and your car is knocked out on the track, you stay in your car unless it's on fire. Unless you are in imminent danger of staying in the car, you stay in the car until emergency personnel get to you, because that's how you eliminate this. And there have been incidents in the Sprint Cup where it's never led to this, but I think you've got to eliminate it at the top level. And if you stop the Sprint Cup drivers from doing it, if you stop the Tony Stewarts of the world from throwing helmets on the racetrack, I think you stop the Kevin Ward Jr.'s of the world from doing it on a dirt track and having a terrible, terrible incident like this happen.
Yeah, listen, Steve, I agree with you, and I think that's probably something we're going to see happening now. Listen, thanks for joining us early this morning. I really appreciate it, Steve.
You got it, Nick. Anytime.
Take care, my friend. Steve Lehman, News Channel 5 Sports, giving us some good perspective on that. Now, Nick, I want to bring you right in. Now, I kind of am aligned with what Steve was just saying. Okay, I kind of feel that way. And like you said, the bottom line on this. Now, you've looked at this over and over again. And let's go ahead and play the video as Nick talks about how you perceive this or why you think there's still some question about whether or not Tony Stewart could be open to, was this more than just an accident? And Mary, you run it when you can. Graphic, pay attention. There it is. Ward feels he was pushed off the track by Tony Stewart. He's mad about it, okay? Yellow flag comes out, okay? This is a dirt track. He gets out, and he's furious. He's like, Tony Stewart forced me off the track. I'm going to confront him. And it's just what Steve was talking about. What on earth is he thinking? Well, this car is still going pretty fast. He walks out. He's pointing. Tony Stewart right there. Hits him. And it almost seems like he swerved into him, and you hear a modest acceleration. Boom. hard to watch, folks. That's one angle. That's the one everyone's seen. We understand there's another video that has surfaced, amateur video that's been turned over to investigators from a different angle to see if that tells them anything else. What do you see there?
Well, I mean, I don't think anybody would say that Tony Stewart meant to, to cause the death of another individual. I think that's very clear, and he's not been charged with a crime. So not only is he presumed innocent, he's not even been charged. So we have to look at it from the perspective that he's done nothing wrong.
Sure.
But there are varying degrees of murder, and some of them, like reckless homicide or criminally negligent homicide, do not require any intent whatsoever. I think if you remember, we did this Ron Killings trial here.
Yeah, years ago, Lakeisha White in Rutherford County, and he was driving quickly through a road and hit the little girl.
That's exactly right. And in that particular case, you don't have to show that there was any intent to kill those people. It's just that maybe you were engaging in a reckless action or somewhat of a negligent action. And so I think that there's still a good chance that he could be charged, but I think there's even a better chance, if he is charged with some kind of offense like that he would be able to beat those charges at a jury trial.
And hypothetically, as you watch that, because we kind of talked when you first sat down, and I was saying, Nick, I don't see it, and you gave me what could be plausible. You don't know, we don't know till we see everything. But hypothetically, what kind of scenario could bring charges? If they determine that he comes around, and while he didn't say, oh, I'm going to hit him and kill him, he's thinking, oh, he's in the road, here's this cocky kid, I'm going to kick some dirt in his face as I zoom by, and maybe he just did it too fast, traction caught, and he slammed into him. Is that the scenario that someone could come with?
Maybe there was a little of that macho stuff going on, because I mean, he caused the accident by pushing him into the wall. The caution flag comes up. He knows where the accident is. He knows who's involved in the accident, and so he knows exactly the location of everything. And in that video, you'll see 5 or 6 other drivers that pass by with and don't run into Ward, and they're closer to the inside. But then Stewart comes out, and you hear that rev or that acceleration that no one else is making as they pass by. If he was trying to throw dirt on him, or just do a little macho something or another, and something really bad happened like that, well, then that is a crime. Accidents happen, and that happen every day in this world, and people die every day, but it doesn't mean necessarily that that's a crime. But if you engaged in some kind of macho behavior there, not intending to kill him, you still could be found guilty of some sort of crime, or at least charged.
Okay, and it's interesting because I think most people, are coming at it, even though if you go on the blogs, there's a lot on both sides really going off. But what Steve Lehman said, of course, none of this happens if Ward doesn't get out of the car and do what he did. Certainly, there is some fault on his side. The poor kid's dead now, but what he did there, incredibly stupid, all right, walking out onto the track. Again, unfortunately, we see other NASCAR drivers doing the same thing, setting that example, and that's why they have to have a rule. But he put himself in harm's way.
Well, but don't kid yourself either. NASCAR is huge business, and they like Tony Stewart throwing helmets at cars, okay? Because that is good for ratings. That makes Sports Center, and that boosts the entire sport, okay? So it's they're cutting their nose off to spite their face if they make some rule where they can't get out of the cars. I mean, they like a little bit of drama. It's good for business.
Yeah, they just hate that you see a youngster that sees this maybe as an example going too far and then getting hit. Okay. What do you think? We're going to take a break on that. We're going to see that video again. I want to look closer about what you're talking about, where you hear a little of that acceleration. And what do you think? I mean, purely, just a horrible accident where there was poor judgment by Ward walking out there? Or do you think there's a chance Tony Stewart's culpable? Because the bottom line is it's still open. The latest is a second video surfaced, and investigators have not closed this case. I'm talking about criminal investigators. So we'll take your phone calls, hear more from Nick, and look at what possible charges could be there, and show you that video again right after this.